I'm Amritesh from the Purple Corner, and we have here with us Nilanjana Roy, who has written several books and has extensive body of work throughout several years. I just start right away. Can you share the inspiration behind the latest work that you have, Black River, and sort of how it reflects your personal experiences and
Well, part of the book came out of living in Delhi for many, many years, loving the city, but also starting to see it through the eyes of people who came from very different worlds than I did. And you started to wonder, what the city is like for migrants who come here from Bengal, Bihar, other parts of the UK, and what kind of friendships they make. And that was one strand. One strand was very sad. It was just to do with my years as a gender reporter for the New York Times, among other places. And you were just feeling that I was looking at a landscape of absence. Oh, so many girls are just killed casually. So many young women are killed casually. And we move on. The news cycle keeps moving on. But you don't see the dimension and the depths of that loss in the lives of the people left behind. Of the father who might grieve his child, of the family who might, live with the rest of their lives with these absences. That was the second strand. And the third was just, I was writing this in, I think roughly about 2017-18, thereabouts. And you could feel that the temperature of the country was changing. And we have learned to live alongside each other after a great deal of pain. In part through the freedom struggle, in part with partition. We actually came back from that terrible, time of massacres, that deep rift, and we learned how to put aside our differences and come together as Indians. And now you feel that those old bonds are being forcibly severed and ripped apart, and I just wanted to capture a little bit of the friendship that can happen when you come out of places where you're not even allowed to meet, into a place like Delhi where willy-nilly, a Chand and a Rabia and a Khadir might find themselves flung down on the banks of the Yamuna. And out of that, an unexpected but lifelong friendship. So it is about friendships, where there's murder and sadness.
You have dabbled between different genres. You have written fiction, you have written non-fiction, you also have or magical realism, you say.
Fantasy, yeah.
So right. So how do you approach the writing process for each of these books, and how these sort of different creative endeavors aid in your process?
Honestly, it's organic. I think I've been very, very lucky to spend my life as a reader, sometimes an editor, and a writer. I love books. I love reading. I love the fact that instead of this short attention span, you get an entire world in which you can, immerse yourself, you can escape into it, or you can simply wake you up, I swear. And the reason why I'm terrible, I edited about 3 different registers. I've held many, many jobs before I was a writer. And I worked, my first 2 books were fantasies about a clan of cats set in Delhi, where the stray dogs jumped in, cheese jumped in, tigers. But I think I just like switching gear a lot. Partly it's the book that you want to write that shows you what it's always going to be. And partly, writing shouldn't be that serious either. It should be a little bit of a playground. You should feel free to jump around and do what you want. And being a little more seriously, I think when you change genres, you also change your muscle. And you learn, or you have to learn a little bit. Whether you've learned that well or not, I don't know. It shows up in the book. But it's part of what makes writing fun. You're not doing the same thing over and over again. And as each book changes, it also shapes you. You start to understand what it is that you so keenly want to write. And I think for me, in one line, the entire writing career could be summed up as humans are interesting, non-humans are even more interesting. So I want to do as much as I can in as many different forms.
So now I'm curious, what is your next work going to be on? Like, what's the genre based on? If you have started thinking it was.
I've almost finished a couple of drafts. And this one is easy because I'm staying with crime for the next one. And bringing back just one character from Black River, not the rest, but one of them is coming. And I think I'm staying with crime because I still have something to learn from this. But in terms of tempo and beat, Black River almost had a slow melancholy about it. And it's a book that's very fast-paced at one level. I think it also has a slowness to it. So the next book's going to be very different. Set in Delhi, I think, but also partly in the Himalayas. I'm going to have as much fun as
I'm sure you. Uh, your initial books, they have animals. It has a very deep-rooted love for nature. Can you discuss how your passion for wildlife and to raise awareness about these things to reflect in your work?
I don't think I consciously wanted to raise awareness per se, but the cat changed things for me. I didn't grow up with pets. One of my family members has a serious case of asthma. And it was only after I got married that we adopted our first cat. It was very small and a little ginger, very bright pink.
What was the name?
Her name was Mara, which is the same name as Mara and Wild.
Oh, wow.
And she had a really loving heart, and then she went off because she was a friendly little soul. She introduced us to other cats, and at some point I realized that I was living in a city, Delhi, Kolkata, Bombay. These are just human cities, no? I mean, they are, it's the middle of nature. Nature does not live at a distance. That's what I very strongly believe. The cats also allowed me to form friendships with, currently I've made a slightly unwise friendship with the cheel who lives on the roof and who is occasionally...
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, you know. But at some point when you follow animals around for any length of time, you understand that their lives and their friendships or their sorrows, their griefs are as strong and as important to them as they are to us. Or you look at monkeys, usually we just see them as a nuisance and slightly dangerous and scary. But they're constantly being chased around a city that is as much theirs as it is ours.
I always wanted to have a monkey as a kid.
And they open the fridge and read banana.
Really?
They really do that. No, they do that a lot. And they're very clever at opening up locks and things to be careful.
I read you're not allowed to have them.
You can't. They are protected species of persons. But I think because I like walking around the city a lot, after a while you see that it's not the humans here, nature over there. I think we all need to come out of our phones a little bit and look around us, and if the air is polluted in Delhi, why is it polluted? Why have we let things get to this point? You see, I don't have a lecture, but when our earth is damaged, when the places around us are damaged, when there's dust in the air and the rivers are choked, then we see that whether or not you care about this, you feel it in your skin. And the reason you feel that is because we are not a caste. This is not separate. And nature is also not a pretty scenic background. We have forests, we looked at it. It has a wild, elemental force to it, which demands our respect. I hope that helps.
Sorry?
I hope that helps.
It did. As you said, you have changed roles a lot throughout your career. Can you talk more about how these roles have sort of shaped? Because naturally, the way we grow up, it shapes how we write, how our perspectives are. But if you can talk about how different roles as a researcher, as these have sort of shaped how you write.
Yeah, researching and editing, that has helped a lot. I think I lean a little too much on journalism at this point because it's familiar and there's a security to it.
And there's also, it connects with your book.
Yeah. So what these give you, the research is part of it. You do know how to go to archives. You do know how to look up things and, seek interviews and check facts. And that's the mechanical stuff. But all of that, what it probably gave me was a big gift. The ability to stop and listen. To actually, interview people who came from very, very different circumstances and backgrounds than yours. And very early on as a journalist, the big thing that you learn is that your perspective is not the only one. The way you see the world, all your comfortable certainties, they're not shared by everybody. And then you get used to not just listening, but trying to figure out if this person has said something and I find it hateful or biased or bigoted or whatever. Where does that come from? What has formed his worldview? You see? You try not to judge so much, and you try to understand a little bit more, even when you fail. That's the biggest thing it's given me, but along with research, the other part of writing is also just the imagination. And that's something that I'm stepping deeper and deeper into. Sorry, I was just busy. Right. Yeah. And that part, I think the imagination is incredible. It's hard to describe. If you ask writers where the ideas come from, they have all kinds of cute responses, but the truth is we don't really know. These people who make it into our books. In that sense, while the Wildings is pegged as fantasy, large part of it, partly more like realism, simply because I knew the animals I was describing.
I've always thought of it as a magical realism series.
You can like
I will.
and it is technically magical realism because there's that little element of Mara is a sender. She has long whiskers and she picks up on visions. So it's okay, a magical realism.
You have been a part of literary community for a while, and you have seen it change over the years. There's also the added element of how social media has a pervasive on our lives. Like I remember reading very recently that when two people today meet, they are not two people meeting, but they are two algorithms. So to say.
That's shitty.
It is, right?
Yes.
And it's very simple. Like if you are, let's say, a very young kid and you just receive something, you have never opened YouTube and you receive anything, any link from them, and you open it, and that sort of shapes your algorithm and how the rest of the digital career is going to be, so to say. So how do you see? I understand it's a very cliche question to ask, I guess. But
it's a big question.
But how do you see the role of literature, and how do you see even the influence of that changing society on literature, so to say? Do you see it changing? I remember recently interviewing Anjum Hassan, and she was also saying about how literature is also changing. It's becoming more rapid. A good part of literature that you see, it's more centralized on how it can capture attention at every point, and it doesn't ask the reader so much to put an effort into what they're reading. So how do you see that? If you can comment on that.
I see social media in two ways. One is benevolent. It certainly has old Twitter, particularly back in the day, Instagram. It's a great tool of discovery. It's a great tool for you to find your community. It can bring you out of loneliness. Flip side of it is when your life becomes all about sharing something that's a little unreal, about seeking light. That's a problem. About, everyone running around in search of attention. Attention has become this kind of currency that's very valuable and important. And in all of this, I wonder, what about yourself? What about the quieter part of yourself? It's also noisy and demanding. And it must be absolutely terrifying. My teens and 20s were free of this pressure. And I cannot even begin to imagine how difficult it would be for anyone who's growing up now to try to balance all of that. I think the biggest, I don't have pronouncements here, but I would say a few things. Try and spend a fair amount of time offline, just as a reminder to be anchored in another kind of world. I'm not going to say real or unreal, because to people on social media, that is very real and it is very real. But what it does in terms of storytelling is something that's downright dangerous. The story that wins is the one that most efficiently abducts your emotions. Does that make sense? So that means that automatically stories that prey on fear, on your fear of the other, on anger, on deep grief, those stories come to the fore. But quieter stories or more complex stories, something that says that history is not as simple as you think it is. Because those require time and reflection, we almost never win. And we are losing a lot out there. How does it change writing in two ways? I think for a lot of writers, we are not actually this forward-facing. You have to learn to do something like sharing my sessions at a festival is new to me, but then I decided I'm not going to do it to get a readership. I will find a way to try and do this so that I'm just sharing something or preserving something for my own pleasure or with friends. There has to be something real behind it. I don't want to I don't want to.
I don't think your books need promotion, so to say. They already have.
Just don't want to.
And sure.
You know, I don't think I'm very good at being a good brand. I think I would be a very bad brand.
It's a rather obnoxious thing too, that is necessity for everyone to have a brand.
Not every author is wants to do this or can do this, and then you don't want to privilege the rest of that. But what are we saying here? We are saying basically that it's the artificiality that it promotes that is dangerous, a little, can suck you in. But storytelling itself, I think the novel in recent years, whether it's been Indian fiction, when you look at what Devika Rege or Tejaswini Apnireham or Janice Pariyat, just to name three of the resources are doing, you see that there is such a deep pleasure to making something, to creating something, to staying with writing for a period of months, sometimes years. What is it about that we love? I mean, it's hard to actually take your book through several drafts in it. Most of us don't speak of the hard, most of it we speak of the wonder of discovering new story. There is a huge benefit to not just slowing down. There's a benefit to doing deep work. And there's a benefit also when you read novels for pleasure. Some of the deepest pleasures come from switching off social media and disappearing into this world that feels powerful because it's being built layer by layer, bit by bit over time. One of the things areas where storytelling is inexorably going to change is with the advent of AI. But I've seen so many things come and go that I'm also looking at this with a little bit of skepticism. AI will change the world. Yeah, we have heard this before, but okay. It's going to make it much easier to produce novels as a commodity, as a product, as something that can be placed on the shelf.
They already are to an extent.
Of course. But have you ever played around with AI? Prompt creation is a lot. And depending on the prompt, everything changes. So again, it's like, do you really want to ride that dragon? In that case, you have to learn how to train it. And don't forget that AI at its best, what does it train? The human voice. Human books, including one of mine that was into a data set along with, half the world's writings. So ultimately, even AI is not that artificial. There is a part of it that is very human and very messed up. Yeah, I think the pleasure of any form of art, we're talking about novels, fiction, writing at this point, but the pleasure of anything that you see, a music performance, spending time with art, and I don't mean just walk you through an exhibition, but just sitting there and letting, a painting or a sculpture change you. I've seen that happen so many times, this time at GLF. People stop by, those huge metal horses, or they stop by that wall with the demons and the asuras being painted, and they pause. They want to take something in because it enriches them, because it nourishes them. I do not think that it's choosing, And yes, for a brief while you might be writing to hook attention, but honestly, writing is the worst way to do that. Instagram is means that if you really want attention, then you can find it different ways. What is writing about? It's about depth. It's about returning to yourself. It's about discovering things that you never even knew existed. And all you have is 26 hours. And every one of you can create a completely different universe out of them, and that is it.
What you said just reminded me of something that I read a few months back, that how the only active form of entertainment is reading. All of it, whatever you do, whether you're listening to a song, you're listening to a podcast, you are watching, it's all passive. You do not have to put in any effort. It's just being consumed to you, it's just being fed to you. And while I'm not demeaning any of it, I'm just saying that reading is the only form of entertainment which requires you to constantly pay attention, to constantly put in efforts, because the moment you stop doing that, it stops. You are not being fed anything up there. I'm making it
I'm about this. I'm thinking about this because to me, I agree and disagree. I see exactly what you mean out here about reading being something that challenges you, because with the words, you're taking that and you're recreating a character. It's something that's been said for a very long time, that a book is partly created by the writer, but it's also partly created by the reader. They're co-owners, co-authors. Two people can read the Wildings and come out with completely different impressions. the ways that they see Mara or Qatar or Southpaw would be completely from each of me. I don't know. I can't look inside your head. But I would say not everything is there to be just consumed. I was sitting under the lawns with a keen music aficionado who is definitely not just consuming a concert, was listening with care and intention and, with that massive vocabulary of music behind it. So it comes back, keeps coming back. Now you're seeing a thread to this conversation. It keeps coming back to the reader, and it keeps coming back to the person who is being fed whatever it is on social media. Do you want to be a consumer? Because then your life moves in a different direction. Or do you actually want to be somebody who is active because that you're observing from the world? It may be a fictional world, maybe an imaginary. What is it that you want to let into your life? What is it that you want to bring in? That is that. And in that, you can also stop just, the habit of mindless consumption of wanting to be always in, wanting to be entertained, access, totally free. But wanting, everything to be made easy, that's not what I do.
A cliche analogy of blame you were and this.
Yeah. And it's not cliche. So
It is. I guess I've read it many times. And yes, I'd like to know. I have another question. I'll just try to wrap it up this. Oh no, yours. No, it's not for me, not for you. So you also much be tired. There are two things. So, and I'm not saying your answers are beautiful. I would have loved for you to go on for longer. There are two questions. One, I would love to know what were some of your literary influences when you were growing up. You can name authors and names. And what are you reading?
I have to say, I love the way you frame that. People, when they ask me, what my favorite book is, my mind goes blank. Because there are too many from different periods. But I grew up in a very eclectic, book-loving household. Bangla, English,
Oh, right. No. Bangla in the sense your parents were Bengali. That's what I meant. Not
Father was from Orissa, but yes, he knew Bengali, and her mother is Bengali. So we grew up, just assuming that both languages belong to us. There was never a question of later you encountered questions about English. And I read everything. I was obsessed. I used to bother people for stories all the time. And what I remember most is surprisingly poetry, whether it was Apul Tapul or whether it was The Child's Garden of Verses, edited by the adventure writer Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yes.
An old anthology. I remember folktales very powerfully. Everything from Tuntuni Boi to, all the rock bushes and
They used to make all those, I think it was in art and they used to make these delightful animations.
Yeah.
Gopal.
Yes. I remember what you mean. In Bangla also, a lot of it was very rhythmic, and as a child, you loved that beat. But we also grew up with a lot of Russian children's literature. And Olga Perevskaya's Kids and Cubs. I mentioned this in interview after interview about the Wildings. Very few reporters take down that name because it's unfamiliar to them. They take down the others.
I'll make sure this channel is taken down.
So they take down the others because they remember that. If you say Richard Adams, Watership Down, people know that book about rabbits. But she was this Russian writer who wrote the most marvelous stories about growing up with a family that took in foxes and befriended tigers because they lived in the wilds of Russia. And I'd only discovered many years later that she had been jailed later on one of Russia's more repressive purges and spent many years in the Navy. But these stories were full of sunlight and happiness, and they made a powerful impression on my mind. And as an older reader, I think I loved Garcia Marquez, I loved Rushdie, and I loved Toni Morrison with all my, I'd stop here because otherwise I'm going to keep listing them. But you know what it is? It's books that are childhood friends. Hindi also, there was Champak. It was a little magazine favorite story.
My dad was in the army, so when we would travel, we'll always purchase a champak and there would be green comics.
Yes.
Bye.
So there was Champak, there was Tinker Comics, and there was Shankar's Weekly, if you remember. Before even I think Shobha Day or others. I think that's where it came from. But I had a quarrel with him, because I didn't like my teacher at school. So Hindi I only discovered in my 20s, and I started to read the stories of Shivani ji and Agir. And then I was like, this language is beautiful, and there are so many forms to it. There's no one Hindi, there are multiple Hindis. It's like rivers flowing into an ocean. And I never stopped reading. Actually, I'm looking back and you're making me think about this. I've always known that I was lucky, to grow up in a house where people prize books the way today people prize success or, my father was workers. And we were like, we have lots of books that father buys encyclopedias and my mother tells me stories, and that was wealth. See? I've thought I was lucky about that, but you're making me realize that I was also very lucky to have not one but three languages. It's been such a wonderful lifetime of reading. Thanks.
And if you can talk about, sorry, I didn't interrupt you. What you saying? No, you don't. You don't. Beautiful to hear you. If you can talk about your what you're reading right now.
What I'm reading right now is one second. I just have to switch mental cases.
You're stuck in that.
I've started to read, I think, a lot of Indian writers who are doing non-fiction and fiction out here. But Indian names are coming to me. One of it were Murugan's beautiful set of short stories. I knew his novels well. I opened the short stories and it starts with a lovely story about a cat. Where the cat is not made cute or small or whatever, but the cat is given respect, dignity, and treated as cat. And that's completely sweet. I think it's called Sandalwood Soap and Other Stories. Okay. And I'm reading a couple of manuscripts by friends that I'm really excited about. Even some novels coming out next year. And I'll be reading up for reviewing purposes. The last book I read was Navigate the Okay, so I think we should end it here. But it's crazy how the world is going upside down. Autocracy is developing, social media, war breaking out previously in the Middle East and Europe. But in terms of books, I'm amazed at how writers always step up to their time, which is true. And this year, again, abroad, I've read beautiful work by Barbara Kingsolver, by Zadie Smith, Paul Lynch I mentioned. Many of the writers who are here at this festival. I want to mention Albert Nerve and Ray's criticism in the New York. If you love books, if you love ideals, you must read.
Thank you so much for it too, and I hope you have a great day.